DCC, so good to be with you this weekend. So honored to be sharing with you. A big shout out to my homie, Pastor Brad, for giving me this opportunity to share with you and to fill in for him as he recovers from his vacation, literally recovers. We're praying for him. But before we get to where we're going to land this weekend in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, so put a pin there and hold that for just a moment. Before we do that, I want to actually rewind and go back to the summer of 1991. I was 13 years old, and I remember that summer because my parents took me and my sister to see this movie called Boys in the Hood. And it was a very, very interesting film, and one that I remember to this day. It's a classic black film, and you had these young men who were trying to navigate a very, very tough environment in South Central LA around about the late 80s. And you had gangs, drugs, violence, a lot of different things going on that young people and all the people in the community had to contend with. And so you had Trey, who was played by Cuba Gooding Jr. You had Ricky, who was a star athlete, played by Morris Chestnut. And then you had Doughboy, who was a dope dealer, played by Ice Cube. And these young men were trying to navigate this very, very challenging environment. And with all that was going on, Trey and Ricky did not want to succumb to what was happening. Doughboy, he had already basically given his life to the streets and said, hey, this is, what I'm going to be doing, and it is what it is. But there was also a song that was written by hip-hop artist Eazy-E called Boys in the Hood, which was a title track of this movie. And the opening lyrics to the song went a little something like this. Because the boys in the hood are always hard. You come talking that trash, we will pull your car. Wanting nothing in life but to be legit. And then I got to stop right there because the lyrics are not appropriate. But what Eazy-E was saying is that this environment is hard. The boys in the hood are hard. And if you want to survive this environment, you got to be hard. And if you really listen to what he was saying in his opening lyrics, wanting nothing in life but to be legit. So in other words, if you're going to survive in this environment, you need to be legit. You need to be hard. And who doesn't want to be legitimized? Who doesn't want to be valued? And I think sometimes we find ourselves in situations and we find ourselves in environments that are influencing us to be a particular way if we're going to survive, as opposed to going against the grain or going in the opposite direction, which is a lot more challenging. And that's really what I want to talk about today, because if you analyze these letters that were written to 7 different churches in the beginning of the book of Revelation. So there are writings by John, who's exiled on the Isle of Patmos, and he's written these letters to these 7 different churches. And what you need to understand is that these churches were navigating a very, very challenging environment. They were trying to live out, they were trying to live in a way that was pleasing to God. They were trying to do the right thing regularly, but the environment around them was just very challenging, and it was very difficult to continue to go against the grain of Roman culture and go against what was happening around them. But these letters were written to these churches to really challenge them. And I'm not suggesting that what they were facing was like South Central LA in the late 80s, where there was gun violence and there's drugs and all of these sorts of things. But it was a tough environment. There were definitely things going on that were not cool that they had to contend with. And you also need to understand that because they were Jesus followers, they were Christ followers, they were seen as lazy because they didn't work on the Sabbath. They were seen as body mutilators because they believed in circumcision. And they were also seen as atheists because they only believed in one God. And so there was this pressure around them to compromise. But there was one church, or actually two of the 7 churches that did not compromise. And one of them was the church or the believers in Philadelphia, this province, this Roman province. And I want to read to you just a few verses of what was said to these believers in Philadelphia. Starting in verse 7 in Revelation 3, it says, "To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, and you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars. I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world and test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of the heaven from my God, and I will write on them my new name." This weekend, I just want to use for a subject, stay the course, because I think this is what this letter or these words are meant to do. I think this is the encouragement that is meant for these believers, is to stay the course. And it's a message that is comprised of three things that I want to highlight for you this weekend. And these three things are not necessarily things that we would be overly excited about. These are not three things that are regularly found, I think, in what we would consider to be successful marketing campaigns. But there are three words that I think are essential for staying the course. That's obedience, patience, and endurance. Again, I know those are not necessarily sexy words in our context, but let me just unpack these for you over the next few moments. First, obedience. The words that we just read, that John has written, they're in red letters, so they would indicate that these are the words of Jesus. And so Jesus is saying, I know your deeds. You have kept my word and have not denied my name. In other words, you have been obedient. And this was very difficult to do. It was very difficult to live up to this God standard and go against the grain. In the culture at that particular time, there were certain things that were going on that were a restriction for the people who followed Jesus. And I think the same is true for us in our context. Like there are different things that happen around us that will go against what we say we believe as Christ followers. And that's very challenging when you have a culture that is basically living according to the Sprite tagline, obey your thirst. Like whatever I feel like, whatever I want, whatever is cool with me, that's what I'm going to go after. But God has called us through Jesus to a different standard. And let me show you, or let me tell you one of the things that was challenging for these group of believers at this particular time in Philadelphia. Imagine trying to go to the grocery store and buy meat to eat, if you eat meat. Well, where everyone got their meat from was really a place that the Christ followers were forbidden to go to, because where this meat came from would have been from these temples and these pagan temples where meat was sacrificed. And then that meat was taken to the market and they would buy that meat. Well, they were not allowed to eat meat that was sacrificed in that way. So that meant that they literally had to go out of their way, or they had to figure out another way to go and get their meat, which was very inconvenient. And when it comes to following Jesus, I think is very inconvenient. We can only just look at the words that Jesus has outlined for us. Listen to what he said. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. But our culture says, prioritize yourself first. Matter of fact, it should be just about me, myself, and I. But that's not the way that Jesus has called us to live. So literally Jesus has called us to prioritize our neighbor just as much as ourselves. What about this one? Self-promotion is the way to new opportunity. That's what our culture says. But Jesus says those who humble themselves will be exalted. I mean, nobody really wants to think less of themselves or humble themselves. That's not a sexy thing. That's not how you're going to get more followers on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is that you're doing. I'll give you one more. Jesus says, bless those who curse you. But you know what our society says? If you curse me, you better believe that I'm going to curse you. That's just the way that it is. And so literally following Jesus is like saying to yourself, I'm going to get up every day and intentionally go against the grain of our culture. I'm going to go against everything that I see going on around me. Like, I'm going to follow the ways of Jesus. And that's important. And it's an important distinction because I think many of us are following the routines of church, which is not the ways of Jesus. And the routine of church, like showing up every week or tuning into a message or singing a few songs together, those are not necessarily a reflection of the ways of Christ. We've got to be obedient to the scriptures, which is very, very challenging at times, especially when we see the world around us reacting in a particular way. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now with COVID-19, an upcoming election. We've got civil unrest. But as Christ followers, where are we taking our cue? Are we taking our cue from the scriptures? Are we taking our cue from what Jesus called us to? Or are we taking our cue from the people around us? Or are we prioritizing our comfort and choosing to be silent or choosing to try to protect ourselves when Jesus has called us to be peacemakers, which means to get in the middle of the mix and make peace? So the first thing that I wanted to highlight for us was just obedience. And Jesus highlighting that the believers in Philadelphia were obedient. The second thing I want to highlight is another word that's a bad word that we don't love, is patience. Verse 10 says, you have been patient. And this was a reference to the oppressiveness of Rome. Living under Rome's rule was very oppressive. They didn't love these followers of Jesus, or what they call followers of the way. And they were not their preferred people. They tolerated them, but they weren't loved. And so there was a fatigue that went along with going against the grain of the culture and the grain of living under Roman occupation. It was annoying. And Jesus is saying, I know you've been waiting to be relieved. You've been waiting patiently. Listen, when I think about patience, I got to talk about my own life because I still struggle with that. Even as a little boy, I was always running. I was never walking. I was always getting in trouble for going too fast. I remember one day I was running and running toward my front porch, and I tripped right before I got to the front porch and literally hit my chin on the step of the porch and almost bit my tongue in half. I still have the ridge on my tongue to this day, so it's a reminder of what it looks like to not be patient. But it's challenging for us when we live in this very fast-paced world that's only getting faster, that has everything on demand. We want change right now. We want things at our disposal right now. And it's challenging for us. And I think some of us have good goals, good things that we want to see happen in our lives, but we're challenged because we have unrealistic timing. We want things to happen immediately. This reminds me of a guy by the name of James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that book, you don't have it, I highly recommend it. He tells this story about this guy who eventually lost 100 pounds. But in the beginning, this guy was charged with just going to the gym and staying for 5 minutes each time, doing whatever he could in 5 minutes, and then leaving. And he did that for 6 weeks straight. Now that sounds crazy, right? But the whole point of this experiment was to get him in the habit of showing up, or mastering the art of showing up. And here's what James Clear says: habit cannot be improved if it is never established. The problem with us is we don't have enough patience sometimes to establish the habits that we need to sustain us. We want to show up to the gym for a week and already lose 10 pounds. But it's our inability to grow patience that causes us to abort things before we've even really gotten started. And so Jesus is lauding, or he's applauding these believers, saying, you have been patient, and I see that you have been patient. As it relates to us in our own lives, we are more inclined to pursue results and not necessarily to pursue the patience of discipline. But Jesus is saying to these followers in Philadelphia that because you have been patient, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide a way for you. I'm going to open a door for you. But it was the result of patience. So the first thing we see that Jesus is applauding is obedience, then patience, and lastly, endurance. If patience is more related to time because it involves W-A-I-T, endurance is more related to suffering because it involves W-E-I-G-H-T. It's a different kind of weight here. Patience is waiting in time. Endurance is usually the weight that we feel, sometimes physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And oftentimes the longer we wait, W-A-I-T, the heavier the weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, becomes. It's kind of like running a marathon. And over a period of time, as you run and you run and run, the lactic acids build up in your legs and they feel heavier, and it becomes harder to lift your legs and to have the knee lift and the drive you need to continue the race. It's that weight. We need the endurance to keep going. And sometimes when it comes to endurance, it's not that we don't have the right attitude or we don't have the right desire. Sometimes we just haven't gone long enough. We hadn't pushed ourselves, or we just haven't developed the right endurance to stay in the race. And this is a key point here because 5 of the 7 churches eventually compromised. They didn't have the endurance to keep going, to stay the course. At Ephesus, they lost their love for one another. At Pergamum, they accommodated these pagan practices. At Thyatira, they were involved in idolatry and sexual immorality. In Sardis, they had a reputation that didn't match who they really were. And here's the thing. Sometimes we just don't endure. Yeah, we're tired or we're frustrated, but sometimes we just don't want to, if the truth be told. And I think sometimes we don't endure because we are unaware of our own capacity. There's more to give. There's more to do. There's further we can go. It reminds me of this cartoon artist for the New Yorker named Bob Mankoff. And long story short, Bob Mankoff wanted to be a cartoonist for the New Yorker, but he didn't realize what the journey was going to entail. He created all of these cartoons over 3 years, I believe over 2,000 cartoons, and was rejected every single time for 3 straight years. Bob Mankoff, though, because he had endurance, went on to become the editor of the cartoon department at the New Yorker because of his endurance. Just when he thought he didn't have enough, because in the beginning he only created 27 cartoons, and he said to himself, who can create more than 27? And he created hundreds and still got rejected. But because he kept going, he developed this endurance, and he was able to actually get or reach his goal. Let me just say, the gift of endurance is this. It grows, it perfects, and it expands our capacity. We love great performance, but we don't love grueling process. But it's the process that makes all of the difference. And Jesus is saying to these believers in Philadelphia, hold on to what you have left. And I'm echoing the same words to you, DCC, this weekend. Hold on. There's something coming on the other side of this. There are a lot of things happening around us. As I mentioned before, this is a very challenging and difficult time for us for many reasons. Maybe economically, maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually. We are in essence in the middle of a crisis. And it is in those moments when we are tempted to go in another direction. Maybe because of we feel uncomfortable. Maybe because we're frustrated. Maybe because we're scared. Maybe because we don't know what to do. But the challenge this weekend is to stay the course. Jesus says 6 times, I will. And what he's promising is protection, redemption, and victory if we hold on, if we're obedient, if we're patient, if we endure, if we choose his way and not our own. Yes, there's drama. Yes, there's frustration. Yes, there's plain craziness. But Jesus is saying, I got you. I got you. Don't be concerned. Don't be moved. Don't be stirred. Don't compromise because of everything that's going on around you. Endure. Stay the course. And listen to what he says. He's saying, not only am I going to give you victory, I'm going to make you a pillar. And what a pillar is an example. What a pillar is something that holds up things. And so not only am I going to give you a victory, I'm going to give you the strength, and I'm going to make you a pillar to hold up others, to hold up your community, to hold up the standard around you. This is what Jesus is promising us. And so I just want to encourage you this weekend, as we think about everything that's happening around us, the crisis of our faith, the crisis that's happening within our community, the crisis that is swirling in our culture. Jesus is calling us, those who follow him, to be the pillar, and he will strengthen us and he will lead us. Let me pray for us this weekend. God, I thank you so much for the words from Jesus to this group of believers in the province of Philadelphia that we can take as encouragement for us, those who follow you, those who call ourselves Christ followers. God, we thank you that you said if we're obedient, if we're patient, if we endure, that you would protect us, that you would open a door for us, that you would eventually give us victory and make us pillars. God, help us to not succumb to what's happening around us. Give us everything that we need to stay the course. And if by chance there's someone who is exploring their faith in you and who's trying to understand who you are and what it means to follow Jesus, God, I pray that you would give them a revelation of who you are, and that you would encourage them and help them to take a step towards you. And I pray that you would strengthen them, and you would strengthen all of us, and help us to be interconnected. Help us to be a community that supports, that surrounds, that holds each other up when we're at weak points and have weak moments. Because we need each other to survive, and we need your spirit to help us to be obedient, to be patient, and endure. It's these things we ask in your son Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you this weekend, DCC. Hope to see you again soon. God bless.